Welcome everybody to the next episode of the Learnit Podcast. I am so excited to have jeewan joining us today in the studio.
You.
So thank you so much, jeewan, for being here today with us.
Absolutely, it's my pleasure.
Yeah, and I'll tell you one thing. If everyone does a little bit of research on jeewan, there's enough information about him out there. So our goal today is to ask him questions that maybe we weren't able to find about you.
Okay.
Personal questions, professional questions. So we're really looking forward to diving in.
All right.
And the first one, I would love to learn a little bit more about your childhood. So I never got to learn more about that from the reading I did. I want to know how your teachers would describe you, how your parents would describe you. What was it like growing up?
So I was born out west in Calgary, and then my mom, because she has a profound love of winter, and that's sarcasm, they moved back to Trinidad when I was quite young. So I grew up there. For elementary school and secondary school. I went to a Hindu elementary school and a Catholic secondary school. My grandparents on both sides were farmers. On my mom's side, we had a lot of cows, dairy, right? And on my dad's side, it was lots of land with growing trees and fruits and vegetables and stuff like that. So I was really, I would say, blessed in that sense. We weren't, I wouldn't describe us as being poor. We weren't rich. We were happy, and whatever we had, it was enough. But being able to grow up on the land, and I remember climbing trees, mango trees, and sitting in them and eating mango and whipping the seeds down, maybe at my friends, stuff like that. I think in school, my mom would say, if this was as much as I needed to do, I would do this much. And she said I was always like that ever since I was a kid. And I think that pretty much has extended through my career. Anybody who has been my supervisor would always say, what you do in 1 year, most people would do in 3 years, right? So I have, it's always been that way with me. I have a profound love of the ocean. And for me, growing up in the island, I think also part of my ancestry that we recently discovered in the last decade, our indigenous ancestry, which is Polynesian, as well as growing up in the Caribbean. You have this connection to the ocean. And so even in moments where I've been quite ill, when I need to heal, I go to the ocean.
Wow, I love that. I mean, my mom always tells me, she's like, if you ever want peace, go sit next to water and just close your eyes for a bit. And you won't, things will just happen and you'll feel a lot more peaceful, in that environment. And I want to sort of dive deeper into one of the things you said, which was, being able to achieve a lot in a shorter period of time. Mm-hmm. So what do you think, what are some things that you feel like you have done in your career or your personal life that have, helped you do that? Is it certain values? Is it the way that you operate? What's some advice you'd give someone that's probably looking to do the same thing?
So it's interesting. I have two thoughts on achievement, and one is that we always want to strive to be our best. But I also feel we're anchored in a culture that tells us we have to keep going for the next thing. Yeah. And I don't actually believe that's what we need to do. I think that what I've been learning over time is, there are moments where you strive for something, but the thing that I've really been trying to encourage folks to really think about are what are the things that bring them joy, and what's the vision that they have for themselves in their life. And a lot of times I feel like we quantify that in terms of money, but when I sit with people and I coach folks who want to be leaders, and I say, but what's behind the money? What do you hope to get? Right? And it's typically things like more time, a sense of joy, time with family, time to be able to do things that we love, a way to be able to give back, right? And so if we actually head towards those things, I think our lives begin to make a lot more sense. For me, I would describe, education was not my first career, was my second career. Initially when people talk to me about becoming an educator, I was like, yeah, no, not for me. I mean, my dad was a teacher, my aunt was, aunts, both of them,
Oh, wow,
right?
okay.
But it wasn't something that I saw for myself. And it wasn't because I thought it was bad or anything. It wasn't me
Yeah.
at the time. But the more and more, I think what called to me, what spoke to me, and depending on the language, people say purpose, dharma, like whatever language that we use, something calls to you. And I think that, and I always say that, you know, which is a little bit different than the way some of our families raise us, which is like, go for the job that'll get you the money because the money is a thing. I tell people don't do that, right? I say, go for the thing that your heart's calling you to.
Yeah.
And if the thing your heart's calling you to is not going to make you the money that you might need, think about what you need to do on the side, but stay focused on the thing that calls you, right? That speaks to you. And whoever you are and wherever you go, as long as you stay aligned to that calling that's inside of you, you're doing the single most important job in the world, and everybody can be doing the most important job in the world wherever they are, right? I don't see it as the higher up you are on the hierarchy, that the better you are.
Yeah.
Till now, people, and a lot of people who actually know me, not the people who might see me in general, even my friends, I would say to them, like, I'm a farmer, right? I'm the grandson of farmers. I'm still a farmer. Like, my happiest moment is being on the land, like growing stuff, harvesting stuff, cooking, like doing that stuff. At work, where I am the director, we set up a partnership with a Better Tent City, which was being displaced in the city, and this is a project where they're doing providing single room cabins for people who are unhoused and homeless, right?
Okay.
To be able to get them reintegrated back into society, to get them the health supports they need and other things that they might need to get them. But they were being moved and they didn't have adequate space where they were being placed. So part of what we did, was to share the land that we have on like our property, to say, no, give more space, right? And we're going to partner with them. And I think that because when they're better, the whole community gets better. That's better for kids, right? Because people are like, what does that have to do with kids? And I'm like, well, if our community is safer, it's healthier for everyone.
Yeah.
I think wherever we are, we have that opportunity to make a difference. And I think for me, it has always been connected to how can I make a difference, how can I give back, and I think that's steeped in so many traditions, right? So one of the things that I learned in my family is Hindu, Christian, Muslim. I've learned it through all of those. I have friends who are Buddhist and Sikh. It's so ingrained as part of who they are. And then just general people who just understand that because we're all in relationship, none of us are truly successful if the other ones aren't successful too. So that sense of giving back has been a really important thing to me. The other side of this, and I think this is where we often lose sight of things, right, is that, and I think, how we think about trying to make education better and how we try to make the world better. And there's that sort of like phrase or poem that was, and I believe it was an archbishop in South Africa who said, when I was young and I wanted to change the world, and then basically it goes on to say, and as I got older, I realized that what I needed to change was me. Right.
Wow.
And I think that fundamentally one of the things that I learned in trying to make sure that schools and schooling was better for all children, whoever they are, that they could come in and see themselves and feel like they belong there, was also the healing work I needed to do on myself as a child growing up who never felt I could be fully present in school, that I had to hide parts of who I was, that in fact some of the things that happened in school actually harmed me, and it took time. And so what I realized that a big part of what drew me to making sure this was better for kids also reflected back to me the healing work I had to do on myself. And I think that if we're not doing the two things together, right? And I think fundamentally, as we try to think about, any system, because I worked in the private sector, in business and social work and education, that if we're not doing both things simultaneously, we're never going to actually truly achieve change that we want, right? And change that will be long lasting and meaningful. And even bringing ourselves to achieving a sense of inner peace in the midst of everything that we have,
No, that's beautiful. Very well said. And I think that I personally very much agree with the fact that we always look to change other things. And we always say, there's a problem here. Maybe we should do something about it. Maybe we should work together to solve this problem. But you're right in the sense that very rarely do we reflect on ourselves and say, are there things that we could do better? And I think that, they say 1% at a time, right? Like a drop in the ocean is what makes the ocean, right? So it's like you change one thing about yourself, about the way you are, and that's how it's more persistent, it's more longer term versus something that's just a very short term stint of time.
Well,
right?
yeah, and I mean, there's two ways to look at it. We are a drop in the ocean, and we're also the ocean in a drop.
Yeah,
and that's the two sides. That's the two sides, right? And so for us, like in the role that I'm in right now, as the director of education for Waterloo region, where I have like a huge honor and privilege to serve 65,000 plus children and over 11,000 staff. A big part of the work that we've been trying to do as a senior team, the whole senior team, is as we're trying to address the systemic issues that creates barriers, that causes inequity, is also to do the personal work on ourselves. Because the thing is, if we're not actually trying to change ourselves, when we have to deal with the situations, we're going to default to the old ways. But if we become more introspective, if we learn vulnerability, if we learn, curiosity and wonder, we learn forgiveness, and we learn how to do that first with ourselves, we can do it, and we could show up with grace for others, and be able to understand what else is going on. And that will then, in the Chinese philosophy of the yin and yang, right? Then you have all of the energy, you have it flowing. Yeah, absolutely.
Wow, no, that's very true. And you've been in a lot of leadership roles, and I know you spoke a little bit about the coaching that maybe you do for folks, and in your role today, so many people that you're overseeing, there's the parents, the students, the ministry, the teachers, there's like all sorts of stakeholders, right?
Yes.
So, what do you think your approach to leadership is?
A lot of my approach to leadership really anchors in the belief that leaders as servants, that ultimately, in the Islamic tradition, for example, it talks about the fact that it's the heaviest weight, it's the heaviest responsibility when you get named as a leader. It's not that you've become this thing, it's actually you have way more responsibility in service to the people that you lead on behalf of, right? And so this idea of leadership as service has been something that has always been central to the way I lead.
Wow.
I think the other thing has been, if you were to see the way that we've restructured our entire organization, we've moved away from the typical hierarchy and we've flipped it into a bunch of series of interconnected circles, and I'm at the bottom, not at the top. We actually have students at the top. And this is this notion of seva, of service, of giving back, like we're here on behalf of these. So you become the shoulders for the other leaders, just like the shoulders that we stand on, who helped us to get here, and the shoulders of ancestors who have paved the path. And so there's a sense of none of us are here by ourselves. There's a very, in sort of Western sort of, I would call it mythology, there's this belief that we make it by ourselves.
Yeah.
And my belief is we don't ever make it by ourselves. None of
people.
us do. There are always people, and not only people. I remember, one time when things were getting really, really challenging, and I mean, I would say one of the hallmarks of, for me, with leading has been around change, right? How do we begin to change things so structures could work for all the people that we serve,
Right.
not just some. And so when you try to push up against the status quo, and that has also been a feature of my childhood, I was always like, why is it like this? Why does it need to be like this, right?
Yeah,
You know,
always
it could
questioning,
it could be different, right? It could be different in a better way. And when you push against the status quo, there will always be a pushback, right? That's the interplay of how energy work and cause and effect, if you want to go the science route,
Yeah.
right? And I remember saying to one of the wisdom keepers who I was, very fortunate to sit with and sit in ceremony with several times. And I said to her, some days I don't know if I can do this, and I don't know, it feels too much. And she said something that was really profound to me, that I feel like we've lost a lot of this in the Western context of how we've learned to be in the world, which was, she said, I want you to always remember that when it gets really heavy, that our mother is carrying you and she's holding half of the weight, right?
Wow. Yeah.
And so this idea that we are being held, right? Because oftentimes, and so this, like, and when you think about things like loneliness and anxiety and stuff like that, if we truly understand where we are in the world and the relationships and connections we have, we're never really ever alone. Like, nobody's actually ever alone,
Yeah.
right? But like, I remember the years that I went through the profound pain of feeling lonely and feeling by myself. And what I've learned to do, and this has been another feature of my leadership and something that I coach folks into doing, and has been, how do you lean in?
Yeah.
Right? Lean into the discomfort. So, I say, when you feel that thing in your stomach that makes you feel like that, that's calling you to something new. It's not something to run away from.
Yeah.
So lean into the discomfort, because if you lean in, you're going to discover something completely new.
Yeah.
And it's going to change the way that you see the world, right?
Yeah, and that's where we as humans learn the most, is when we do stuff that we initially think, can I do this? Is this for me? If we do things we're always comfortable with, that's where your learning stops, right? That's where your growth stops. So it's like, even my close mentors, he said, every day you should feel like you're learning something new, and you feel like it's hard. Like, it needs to be hard, because the moment it gets easy, then you have mastered it, right? So then find difficult things, because they teach you the most. Don't run away from them. So I can completely see that, come to life as well. And in your role today, Director of Education for a large school board, a lot of students, a lot of parents as well. What do you think, when you look at the board and look at Canadian education, what do you think are the biggest roadblocks today? Like, what do you think are the biggest challenges we are trying to fight today?
So, I'd say this, and I said this when I did my TED Talk back in 2019, TED Ed. Public education has never served all kids well, ever. Like, systemically, we can predict outcomes for children based on their social location and their identity. And there is no one anywhere who can point to any system anywhere that has systemically changed outcomes for Indigenous kids, for Black kids, for racialized kids, for queer kids, for kids coming out of poverty, for kids with identified learning needs, and then within local context, you're going to have local variations of who's within the margins in those spaces. But generally speaking, we have never done well by them. That to me is what is going to be, and there's a significant, I'm going to talk a little bit economically for a second. There's a significant economic cost to using a school system that is producing outcomes that will harm society in the future. Because when children cannot go through a school system and be able to show up with their gifts, with their talents, and be able to come out as creative problem solvers who understand people in the world are going to see things differently. They're going to be different. But what's the thing that I can contribute, right? Then you're actually creating a cost to society. You're not creating value added.
Interesting. Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And so part of the problem, and the reason why I'm anchoring this as an economic piece is because I feel like for a long time, and over 50 years, we talk about the moral imperative, and I say, yeah, it is a moral imperative, but it's also our professional obligation. Like, don't hide away from the fact that it is our job. Are you going to go to a doctor who is that this hospital or these doctors, that these groups of people always die or will never be healed? So are you going to go to the doctors that are pushing themselves, that are challenging their practice, that are
analogy,
right? And so but for some reason, because it's children, right, we feel almost entitled to continue reproducing this, and adults often feel entitled enough to fight their politics through the lives of children, right? What we've done in our system was we've are continuing to radically change how we think about student voice and centering student voices as students as experts in their own education, right? And so when we did our strategic plan, where we had over 10,000 voices, we created new tools, and over 5,000 of the voices came from kids who are in kindergarten all the way up to grade 12.
Wow. Okay.
Right? So I call it the student strategic plan, because we made sure that just over half were students, and then the other, families, community, staff, right? Setting things up in the restructuring to make sure that we have students' voices engaged actively, not as an afterthought, but in the process, right? One of our policies that directly impacts students, we had over 200 students involved in writing that. We have now in the director's office somebody who's responsible for student voice. And we've put a charter of engagement out into the community to say, here's what our commitment around student voice, around family engagement and community engagement is going to be. Until education radically begins to shift in the direction of what the research has always told us. And this is the other thing for me about education, is that we have more than enough research to tell us what we should be doing, but we've never done it. So here's the thing. We know that achievement and well-being goes up when staff, students, and families are engaged. That's a triangulation. So how do you make sure that your structures are triangulating and they deliberately create that? What does school improvement look like when you actually engage families as partners in understanding the expertise of their children, right? And also actively engage students as experts in their own learning. Like typically what we do with student voice is we tokenize it. And then when we ask students stuff, then we explain it away. Oh, maybe they meant this. Maybe we don't take it at face value, right? So until we begin to triangulate and create structures that are systemically doing it, right? Then what we're doing is lip service. And what we're doing is we're going back to an industrial era model that was created to create people to stand on a factory line and fulfill their piece, right? Even the way that we're teaching, we're still teaching in such a fractured way for the world that children will go into, which we know they're going to hold something like at least 13 jobs in their lifetime to solve problems that we don't know exist yet, in jobs that haven't been created yet. But we're still teaching math and English and geography and history and art, as opposed to, here's a problem, let's solve it. What are all the things we need to be able to know to try and solve it? That needs to be the shift, right? Now, IB has forever been that way. So it's not that we don't have models. Montessori talks about that from the younger age, right? FDK in Ontario, which is inquiry-based learning through play, that's those we have models that exist. So the thing is, now what we need to do, and one of the big challenges to your question is, how do we begin to now create systemic approaches
Yeah.
that makes this be the way the entire system works,
Operates,
right?
yeah. And I think I was listening to one of your older podcasts and in the articles, and it's like, the current school system is based on the Industrial Revolution, on a time where we needed school bells, right? To let people know. So it's like those, we have innovated in different ways, but what you're talking about, which is that systemic change, that whole principles about how we teach and how we educate, it's a process that I find fascinating because I resonate with you, and it's about how do we teach kids to solve problems, not to necessarily do very specific niche things, which they might not need, but the critical thinking, the soft skills, the problem solving, that's what you're building in the kids. At whatever role they get into, they will succeed and they'll be good. Right?
And that's the thing, right? We've lost sight of what is the purpose of school.
Yeah.
Who are the human beings we are trying to help co-create, right? So that they and that doesn't need to be away from having skilled individuals in a job force, who are job ready, any of those things. It doesn't shift away from any of those things. But unfortunately, we want to keep still, and the minute that you start talking about change, we like the pushback is no, it has to be this way, and so then you ask the question why. Well, but that's the way we've always done it, right? Like that's what happened for me. And I'm like, okay, I'm not saying that it wasn't good. Everything evolves. Why are we not evolving public education, right?
Yeah, no, I love that. That's very interesting and a good way of thought. So on that sort of theme over there, when we look to the next, let's say the next semester, the next academic year, is there an initiative or two that you're particularly excited about at Waterloo?
I think one of the things that we've tried to really stay away from is the idea of doing like initiative based work and more looking at how do we systemically and structurally change things so that this becomes the way the system works, right?
Yeah.
And so from sort of flipping the hierarchy like I talked about, and we have something called a North Star that the entire system, the school side and the service side, are all oriented out towards, which is that identity and social location will no longer predict outcomes of students, right? So our entire system is now sort of using that as our compass to be able to move forward. A big part for us now is how do we keep working to build trust? Because when you start trying to change the ways that you're shifting instruction and you're shifting how you do things, anybody who knows the science of organizational change will tell you that you're going to experience highs. You're also going to experience implementation dips. And when you get to those points of where, the highs are fine, but when you hit the implementation dip, how do you stay the course, right? And make sure that you keep your eye on focus on what you're working towards, right? We're looking at how do we deprivatize our practice so that communities understand the work that's happening in schools, because we see it as shared practice, right? That we may not have all the solutions, and that they may have insights that we won't think about. And when you get to that place of triangulation, then you recognize you can't do it without one another, right? So I think that's really the shift for us, and how do we keep making it transparent and accountable so that families and community understand it, because you're going to get pushback. You're gonna have the highs, like I said, which are great. When you hit the drops, how do we make sure you stay steady? Yeah, those
are the toughest points, but that's the true determination of your perseverance, and that's what defines it as well. And I've seen that you're the kind of person who likes to be outside, seeking a lot of adventures. Not many people do that, but I admire that about you. I haven't gone skydiving either, so I'm curious to know sort of if you could share a couple of stories and what that sort of means for you also in your personal and professional life as well.
Yeah, I mean, skydiving was interesting because I don't like heights, right, at all, and for me, it's how I practice personally leaning into discomfort. So if I'm going to say to you professionally, let's lean into the discomfort.
You're not going skydiving.
Right? And that doesn't mean everybody needs to go skydiving, right? Like, I'm not saying that. But for me, what I'm looking for is how, like, so I ran a marathon in the Alps. I ran the marathon because I do not like running. I think running is one of the most monotonous, boring things ever. Now, I apologize
to the runners out
there who think it's the most invigorating thing in the world. And I get that. But for me, it was like, okay, so I think this, I feel this. Let me challenge myself and see what that feels like. And of course, I didn't choose to run a marathon on flat land. I went to the Swiss Alps.
Oh, yeah, of course you did, yeah.
Right. Same thing with skydiving. I think it's been the same thing with my, deep sea diving as well.
Wow.
Getting out there. And all of a sudden, you're face to face with, stingrays and sharks and stuff like that. But for me, also, you learn humility. You learn how to respect nature that way. I'm not going out there to try and conquer anything. I don't believe in that.
Yeah.
I'm learning, for me, I'm always learning my place within it, and a deep sense of respect. So, those are some of the things that I've done, and I've been really blessed to have experiences, exploring caves and underwater in a submersible, looking at coral reefs and, fighting a forest fire, climbing volcanoes.
Jesus Christ,
You've done
it all.
Yeah, I've done a fair bit, and but I think that's one of the things that it really brings me back to is what are the things that bring us joy? And I feel we don't talk about that in relation to leadership because we think about leadership as this thing or as separate. But if you're not feeding yourself through joy, how are you going to ever give back to the people that you serve when your cup is empty, right? And so, and joy feeds your spirit, right? So for me, something I can't get through my day without is my meditation and prayer practice. Like, I have to make sure that I do that. It grounds me, and at work they know sometimes when things start feeling stressful, I'm gone, and they might find me somewhere outside walking barefooted in the grass between the trees, and that's me, grounding myself off and reconnecting. Right? How do we build in those pieces for our well-being that will allow us to be much more effective leaders in the ways that we lead?
I love that. Yeah, you can't give when your cup is empty. I love that.
That's right, yeah.
All right, we're going to shift gears here into a rapid fire round. It's my favorite one because I get to ask you all these quick questions, and we'll do rapid fire, go through a couple of these. So the first one is, what's one activity you've always wanted to try but you haven't yet?
I don't know the name of it, but it's the one where you put yourself in that really large ball and you go rolling down.
Oh.
So that's something that's on my list, and ideally I would love to do it in New Zealand.
Okay.
But that's one of the things. The other one is going diving in the lakes in Palau, where the jellyfish have sort of evolved. Without without stinging you. So yeah.
Wow. Well, we know where to find jeewan next. So, what was your favorite subject back in school?
Interesting. So geography, I think, was one of my.
I didn't expect that.
Physical geography, and all about the land and understanding. All those pieces connected to it. It was absolutely one of my favorites.
Okay, love that. What's your favorite dish to cook?
So I loved to bake bread from scratch. Sometimes, and then I also love making curry chana. Sometimes curried chicken or stewed chicken, like the Caribbean style, right? For those of you who know Caribbean food, good macaroni pie, so stuff like that, yeah. And I have not done it recently, but I used to make a really wicked white chocolate mango cheesecake.
Wow. White chocolate mango cheesecake. You're making me hungry, Jeewan. All right, I love that. What's something you've recently changed your mind on?
I would say on the professional side of things, that we can't actually get to changing the structures if we're not also simultaneously working on ourselves. And so for leaders, one of the things that I think we need to do is create enough space so that our leaders can do the internal work. And what does that mean to create it so that they have time individually as well as collectively?
Yeah.
So that we can do the external work of structural change simultaneously. You need both. And when you miss one, you will never achieve the other.
Yeah. Okay. And last question on the rapid fire. I noticed you have tattoos, so I'm going to put this one in.
Yes.
Can you tell us one story behind the tattoo?
So this came out of ceremony for me. It was from being in ceremony, and I was told it was time to do this. And so actually the entire thing comes out of my own artwork that I do. So I paint and draw when I have time. And within this, it tells the story of my ancestry, my family, and my life today. So it has, for example, where I was born, the countries that I've lived. It has where my ancestry is from. It has my parents and my grandparents. The first thing my grandmother taught me to draw. Where I grew up. It has the creation story from one of our ancestors. Lines, and then even within my family, it shows that we are Hindu, Muslim, Christian.
Oh, I see that. Yeah.
And of course indigenous spirituality all in there. So there's lots. The entire thing would take some time to tell.
Yeah.
But it came through that, and actually, I'm in the process of doing the extension for it. So
wow. Maybe the next time we have you on, we'll get to tell that story too. But I knew there would be a story behind it. That's why I had to ask. All right, now we're going to go to what we call the final question. We have a little bit of a tradition here. So what we do is we have a question that one of our previous guests has left for you.
Oh, okay.
And then we're going to ask you to leave a question for one of our next guests.
Okay, cool.
So, and I don't know the question, so I'm going to read it out for the first time as well.
Okay, all right.
All right, let's do this. So, let's see what we've got. This question is from Director Rashmi Swaroop, Director of Education, Peel District School Board. I'm sure you're familiar.
Wow, I'm very familiar.
And she says hi.
She is an awesome leader. Yeah, okay.
And her question is, how does environmental sustainability inform the work you do?
So, a big part of the work that we've been doing tied to truth and reconciliation and understanding our relationship with the land has been a significant portion of the work that we've been doing as a senior team. So really quickly, what I would say to you is that, the team took that away. We're a growing district, and so our newest school, one of the things that they wanted to do in the architectural design was to consider how do we create a school that is in harmony with the land, right? And that considers it as being part of. And so we worked with an all-female Indigenous-led architectural firm.
Wow.
And our newest school, which we just had the groundbreaking for in Southwest Kitchener, will have shading canopies, will have these features where you feel even while you're inside that you're outside. And you're outside. The other thing, and so there's a lot of pieces. We're going to have like a living roof on one part of it as well. Yeah. And that came through consultation with community and kids and staff, really trying to think about how do we do that in harmony with the land. The other really quick point that I'll say is that one of the biggest things that I've been hearing from students as we've been listening to them is they want us to think about the environmental pieces. And so we've now created an environment, like an energy consumption dashboard that will be available to all schools, that all students will be able to access for their school via the web. And then it will allow students to come together to try and think how they might be able to lower their energy footprint in their local context, their local school. Cool. So it's going to be live. They'll be able to interact with it, set goals as a school. It could be it could be built into the learning that they're doing. But they'll all have access to it.
Wow, I love that. Well, that was a perfect answer, and I know Rashmi said that you would be able to easily answer it. So I'm sure she's confident on that. So we're gonna ask you now to leave a question for our next guest.
Absolutely. There you go. There you go.
Okay, I can't tell if I'm excited or nervous for the next guest, but that's not my battle to fight, you know?
No problem.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for tuning in today. I had a wonderful time, Jeewan. It was so fun, and I got to learn so much about you, about your adventures, everything that you've done, inspiring me to maybe shake things up a little bit once in a while.
A little bit,
and I truly admire your principles and leadership and the way that you carry yourself.
Thank you.
I'm sure a lot of our listeners learned something today. So thank you so much for being here today, Jeewan.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.